Good evening, everyone. We're back. Didn't know if I was going to make this one again. I'm not going to lie. It's absolutely manic. If anyone's seen social media posts from earlier, I mean, we've had a Easter, the week before Easter is always a crazy one. People stocking up the shops and all the rest of it. But yeah, yesterday, wow, we've pretty much just come off the back of 26-hour, I think, 26-hour shift with what I can, only describe as a little cat nap in between preparation for a big shipment coming in, fish going out. In the end, the shipment got delayed. It didn't get back to us until midnight. So 107 boxes. It was a lot of work. We knew it was going to be late. So by the time we got finished, the van was due to pick up at 8:15 that morning. So we just decided to get on and get the shipment packed up. And a couple of hours sleep this morning and back at it again. So we've got another van to get loaded, and couple, I think 3 in the morning. So ready for that Easter break. Can't wait. But the shipment was a big success. Loads of really nice fishing again. So really happy with that. There we go. It's enough of me rambling. One was going to say, we've also got, I'm going to drop this one. Steve's not been prepped on this one, but I'll drop it on him. He can deal with it. I've got a handful, so I think 5 more Hikari calendars that I can give away. It'd be good to get these before it gets any later in the year. So if you want to hit the share button now or any point throughout this, it would be much appreciated. And we'll randomly select 5 people to get them calendars out to hit that share button. So get it hit. Let's get this spread out, and one of them wicked calendars in it for somebody. So there we go. This week we've got a hobbyist on who's been in touch with us. Got a long list of questions and quite a curious backstory. She's just been filling me in on. So we're going to run through that one. And then at the end, there's 2 particular topics I want to turn people's attention to. So in truth, one of them is going to become a little bit of a rant on a topic that I've covered before, and just sort of seeing it again, and it's got my back up. And then finally, I've got a question in from somebody on a very, very good debate I was having on male koi on my personal Facebook page the other day. So probably going to cover that one off. So let's bring in our guest for this week, Sandra. Sandra, how you doing?
I'm good, thanks, Ricky. You?
Yeah, good, thank you. So, do you want to fill everybody in on the backstory before we get started on your list of questions?
Yeah. So my husband and I moved into our house around 15 years ago, maybe just a bit over that, and we had never had a pond before, but the house came with a pond.
Yeah.
And the pond had, I don't know, a few goldfish in it, nothing special. We put the goldfish from our kids' tanks in there. It seemed a little bit empty, and we thought, you know what, we've got a pond now, let's try and get some fish. And it just so happened, my husband came across an advert in the local paper saying some koi fish, I'm giving them away. My pond is, I don't know if it was too small or if they were getting rid of their pond, I don't know, but anyone can collect them for free. We ended up seeing about 2 or 3 different posts from different people over a few weeks saying we're giving away some koi, and we're like, oh well, we'll have some of those then. So we did. We got all these koi. Just quickly, the pond we had was a very basic hole in the ground, the rubber coating, the brush filter thingy. And we didn't know the first thing about fish at all. Anyway, we put these koi in. Really happy, they're all lovely and colourful, and that was our set. And to cut a long story short, from that day onwards, we never had a problem. We just used to chuck a bit of food in. Every now and then it would go like pea soup. Sometimes it would be crystal clear. Might have got the odd bit of blanket weed. Never had parasites that I know of. The fish were really healthy. In that 15 years, I can remember losing 1 fish. And we were just like, I wonder why that is. Oh, it must be old. And that was it. Anyway, about a couple of years ago, I suppose it would have been, my husband, Paul, he went down to the pond and he came and he said, "Oh, you'll never guess what's happened." I was like, "What?" And he goes, "We've got babies in the pond." And I went running down there and there was loads of them, loads and loads of fry. And it was honestly, it was so exciting because all that time, they never had babies. We never thought they could have babies, but they did.
Yeah.
And so once that had happened, we said, we're going to need a bigger pond because, sorry about my tap. You can hear my tap in the background. Sorry about that.
It's all right.
So basically we decided we needed a bigger pond. The fish were going to grow and we didn't want to get rid of them because they were our babies.
Yeah.
So my husband did a lot of research on YouTube, mainly on pond building, specifically, koi pond building. And we had a builder in, an expert to fiberglass and all that sort of stuff. And he built them a 5,500 gallon pond in the ground with fiberglass and all I've got it written down here because he was too shy to come on. He's upstairs hiding. So it runs on a Nexus 320. Just this is for your info. An Evolution Aqua 24-inch bead filter. With a 10,000 and a 20,000 Vary pump. Okay, so we had the pond up and running, I think, December 2020.
Yeah.
And by the time we got the fish in there, it was March 2021. I think that's the right dates. Okay. And, for a few weeks, it was great. We just thought, they're loving it. Nothing went wrong. Everything was lovely. Water clear, blah, blah, blah. And then just suddenly everything started to go wrong. And I'll tell you, we have had nothing but problems ever since. So let's say it started with, we had to learn all about this as we went. So it started with new pond syndrome, which we only found out about later on, what it was about the biological balance of the filter and all the rest of it.
Indeed. And your core water parameters.
Yeah, and it was nitrite, ammonia, and fish were really fed up. And we were like, oh no, we thought they'd love it and they're not very happy. Could not get that nitrite down, tried not feeding them, just couldn't get it down. So this went on for quite a while. Then when they were already feeling rubbish because of the nitrite, they then got fluke, which is it's not funny, but at the time we had the the bottom drains and they've had the bubbles floating up. And my husband and I were down there and I said, oh look, there's a fish and he's playing in the bubbles. He's sort of like doing this through the bubbles. And he went, oh no, he said, that's not right. He said, fish don't behave like that. Turns out they were flashing, which was a new thing I'd not heard of either.
Okay. Yeah.
And he said, I don't actually think that's right. Anyway, so we ended up getting the advice of, sorry about that. We ended up getting advice from a pond expert, and he's a lovely man. Yeah. Sorry. And he came to the pond side because we said, we don't know what we're dealing with there. We've got nitrate. Keep trying to get it down. Nothing. It's all going wrong. Fish are flashing. And he said, you really need to buy a microscope. And he actually did a scrape. He put the thingy on the microscope and he found flukes. Yeah. And he showed me what they looked like. Within 24 hours, I had a new microscope and I was also then able to do that, which was fine. He taught me about water testing, which I then learned how to do and realized I sort of understood the science of water over time. Yeah. So they had the flukes. They went and thought, well, that's good. They've gone. Then we had Costia. Yep. But because Costia are so tiny and I didn't pick it up on the thing at all. And I thought, well, they must still have fluke, but I just can't see them. So we treated them again for fluke. Obviously that didn't work. Yeah. About 3 weeks later, we got the pond expert back out and he said, oh dear, he said, you've got Costia. And he showed me how to look for Costia. Yeah. So he had to do this treatment with FMG. Yeah. So we gave him the FMG and then that was fine. But they were all fine again for a few weeks. feeding from our hands, the most lovely experience ever. I mean, we had some lovely times, you know, down there feeding them mussels and all the rest of it. This is why I still do it, because of those moments, you know.
Yeah.
Then they got fluke again, and then they got Costa again, and then they got fluke again, and then they got Costa again. And in the end, they must have had 3 or 4 3 weeks worth of at a time of FMG. This was advised obviously by the expert, and then obviously the fluke.
Yeah.
Then what happened was they ended up, I think, perhaps being over-treated. I think because we hadn't picked up the Costia early enough in the first place, it then went bacterial. And I've heard you talk about this before. So we've lost now. We now have 6 fish left, and we had about close to 30 fish, and some of them were beautiful. Some of them were big, beautiful fish.
Yeah.
So we then, funny enough, we met Kevin from Exclusively Koi.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and
someone else who's camera shy.
He's been so helpful. I can't tell you how helpful he's been. And he said, I think probably what's happened is where they've had so many things going on, and the treatment's been going in when they're already low. And of course, FMG is pretty brutal, isn't it?
Yeah. It's strong. Formalin's quite potent stuff.
Yeah, and he asked me to send him a photo, and I did. And he said, yeah, they're bacterial infections. And he said, naturally, he said, I could see some of those fish, I think, are actually burned from felt awful, absolutely awful. So he said, right, I think we need to look at this a different way and start treating it differently. He said, what they need is heat and salt. So we put the heat right up to 24. We put 6% salt in. We treated them actually with a Colombo.
Alprex?
No, there was one.
No.
Alprex we have, but there was another one. Can't remember what it was. A bacterial kind of one.
Side effects.
Side effects, Honestly, once we put that side effects in, it changed everything. And the salt, they started to get better. They were still dying, but the ones that were already dying still died, but the ones that were left started to thrive a bit. And then we went in with the Alperex, and we haven't now lost any for a while, and they all are now thriving. They seem to be really great, got their appetites back.
Yeah.
So without sort of taking up the whole hour just on this, my biggest question to you is, why is it that when we knew nothing about water science, we knew nothing about parasites, I never had an idea about what KH was, pH was.
I get it.
We knew nothing. Why is it we had absolutely 0 problems and lost 1 fish in 15 years? And suddenly I feel like I'm a vet and a water scientist. I've learned so much. They've got the lovely pond, and it's all gone wrong
all
since.
The problems. Yeah. So I think you fell victim. Do you know how old the fish were that you got hold of to begin with when you first got them?
Some of them were only about this big, but now obviously are really big. So some of them are actually, I mean, a good portion of the fish we had are actually about 15, 20 years old, I imagine, some of them.
Right, here we go. Yeah. So probably what's played out there, obviously, you've probably benefited from the lack of knowledge to begin with to some extent, because what's probably happened is your pond, that old pond, will have found an equilibrium, a balance. And this is swinging towards a lot of the stuff I do harp on about a lot, even with our big, expensive, posh ponds. And all the rest of it. So nature has basically found its balance, and everything had been finely tuned. The fish have adapted to the environment because you've never really changed anything. So you've just had the same batch of fish, so all the same problems. They'll have got immunity to any sort of viruses amongst the community and things like that.
Right.
Fully adapted to the water because you're not changing too much, you're not interfering too much. You're not interfering through the filter systems too much. So the whole thing will have just found this superb balance where it is pretty much looking after itself. And because you're not interfering with all this other stuff, the water changes, adding new fish, catching in there, all the rest of it, being modest with your food so as not to create any problems. It's just, it's just clicked. And I see this so often. I've seen it in the years at my dad's shop. These ponds of collections of fish that have been left for all this time. The people never touch them, do very little with them, and they go on for years and years and years, looking absolutely great and surviving. So, that's I think that's what's happened in that instance. So that's where they are. But what happens is as well, and this is what scares me, and this is sometimes what scares me when you see people buying fish from ponds such as your previous one that you described, because moving them out of that environment can be incredibly dangerous for them more than anything.
What you mean, moving them from the pond we initially had in the garden to the new one?
Yes, because they've adapted their whole life to that body of water, the size of its volumes, absolutely everything would have been so stable for all this amount of time, so used to it. Then all of a sudden, and like I say, we see it in fish that move. They get moved out of these ponds where it's a completely different environment. There's more exposure to potentially more problems these fish haven't faced in the 15, 20 years of their existence. All of a sudden they get hit with it, and especially when they're older, recovery is not going to be so easy for them. So you've got that process, and then so what your new pond has become is this, probably what we would call a better environment. But ultimately, those fish won't have encountered anything like new pond syndrome for a start. They might have done early on, but they've overcome it. They've had massive stability for all this time in that pond. And all of a sudden, you've gone and hit them with a wave of nitrite and ammonia, which is normal in every pond. It's not your fault. That's perfectly normal. But for them, again, being a bit older as well, the tolerance is going to be a lot less to it. So you've got that. You've probably not had the parasite problems because of this self-sustaining sort of ecosystem that they've lived in that's found this balance. So you sort of compound it all. They've had a big change, even the change in water, because it'll have been, how long was it when you moved them? December to March. So, but even still, that water, if that was just recirculating, that's still very, very fresh water in comparison to what they've probably lived in.
Yeah. So well, basically, they were in mud, mud leaves, and all sorts. So are you saying the parasites? Sorry, but the parasites. So you saying that there would have been parasites in the old pond? It's just that they would have had an immune system against them.
They could have been, but more than likely, because of the level of stability that they've had, probably very little, to be honest.
Right.
Very little. But everything in there was the environment was taking care of itself. You know, them types of ponds, and all we often see it, they get very little blanket weed. There's all sorts of things against the trends of a new modern pond, where you just think this is backwards. So I think you've had the stress of the big water change that's probably hit them. Then we've had new pond syndrome hit them, and then obviously the ensuing parasite problems after that just massively compounded. And Costia left unchecked will destroy a collection of fish. And the difference in you said between a week to even 3 weeks of leaving it is enough for damage and a huge bacterial problem to possibly ensue after it.
I think this is what happened. I think they ended up getting a bacterial infection. We were treating them for Costia when it was already too late. But just out of interest, though, we obviously had the fish that we'd had for 15 years. But obviously when we built the bigger pond, we then bought lots of new ones. I say lots of new ones. We didn't just pick up 20 fish and bung them in.
No.
We did them like 3 at a time.
That as well.
Yeah. So we did all that. Why did they die then? Is that again just the Costia?
Got mixed up in it. Yeah. The whole thing, the new pond syndrome, the parameters, the parasites, all the lot.
Yeah.
So and then obviously, without a doubt, if I didn't know, and obviously new fish had been involved, so the new fish mixing with your old ones, honestly, it's just a perfect recipe for probably what has actually happened.
Yeah, because Paul, my husband, he said, I think he's probably going to say it's all about the fact that the biological filter was just so mature. But then my question about that was, but when I watch YouTube and I see these other guys with their ponds that they've had for years, they still have that, oh no, I've got a pH crash, or my KH is low, or my fish have got parasites, or this, that, and the other. And I think they know what they're doing, and they've had these ponds for like 5-10 years, and they're still going through it. But yet we had none of that. So I just thought, why do you get a pond?
Naivety. You can call it lucky. It is
maybe.
sometimes, but it's just when it gets to a point where it just finds its own balance. And it all works. You know, you could have quite easily upset that balance, or all of a sudden decided to start feeding 3 times the amount of food. Because my guess is you probably fed relatively the same amounts every day, quite controlled, quite structured, everything like that. So this thing really does find its own.
Yeah, I think they had a lot of natural food in there because, you know, all the leaves at the bottom and stuff, you know.
Yeah.
But I just want to know that we will get to that stage again.
You will. I think obviously it's what you'll have been is it unheated, the new pond?
No, we've got it heated. And I think we've got it heated. Honestly, Paul was really cared about how he was doing it, and he wanted to make sure they had the best of everything, and so we got the heating. I want to ask you about temperatures a bit later on, if that's okay. But because we've got it heated, Kevin actually said, get that heat up, get it up to 24 if you can, get that salt to 6%. So that's what we've done. And they have really responded to that. And now we're very confident now, after a few weeks, that the ones we have now are going to be fine. And we're just about got to that point now where we're like, okay, I feel confident enough to introduce some fish in there. Now they seem okay. But I've got some other questions though. Let me see.
But just coming back, obviously the heat and the salt is a really tough thing, because, like I say, over the amount of medication is tough. So when you're suffering with the bad parameters, is enough of a challenge. But then you compound that with the continual parasites, continual medication. It can be burnage, you know. Malachite and formalin is a great one. I've seen people play, you know, a bit too risky with the stuff, so having it mixed where it's somebody else has mixed it. It's not one of the proper manufacturers' bottles off the shelf, you know, because formaldehyde is not one to be messed around with. That burns big time if you get it wrong with that. So a lot at play there. And I think it's coming back. I think actually they might have shown me the pictures of one of your fish. It's sort of ringing a bell now.
Yeah, the white one.
If it was the right one, it did look severely burned.
It was Shiro, and we just thought it had gone red because of the stress, but had no idea that it was. I mean, you know, it had no mucus on it.
No,
it was shocking.
And this is it, obviously, you know, over medicating, getting the meds wrong. Ammonia burns as well. Ammonia does burn, you know, quite quickly and badly. So this kind of stuff you're on about there. And what can happen is as well, when you get a fish like that, as bad as that one looked, now I know we're talking about that one, that fish can become so weak and its immune system so suppressed that fish like that can continuously keep breaking out with Costia. Really seeing that there was a pond I dealt with many years ago, and it was coming back because he was basically treating every 2 or 3 weeks for Costia, just really small amounts of it. And this was over the phone. He's telling me, and this system was, you know, 10,000 gallon, low stocked, superb filtration, really well looked after. And over the phone, it just didn't make sense. Checking the dosages, everything else, and going through it. So in the end, I actually went out to visit the pond, and the moment I walked up to it, there was this one fish isolated way over the other side of the pond with the others, really skinny, no body mass, really struggling to swim. Apparently, it had been a fish that had jumped out the year before, got severely damaged from it, never quite recovered. And sure enough, scraping throughout the pond, found, these low levels of Costia that he's speaking about. Went straight to the sick fish. It's a really sick looking one. It was absolutely covered. So obviously, Costia is a free swimming parasite. So as soon as I saw that scenario, my only advice, as harsh as it is that the sick one needed to be euthanized and got rid of. And that's what they did at that point. It was a very old fish as well, so it was not recovering. And
we've had to euthanize some of ours, unfortunately, because we just couldn't watch them. We knew they were going to die, and it seems that when they die, they take a long time, and it's not very nice.
But one more treatment in that pond I mentioned, and with that fish gone, it was all sorted. So, and we see that happen a lot. You know, in heavily stocked systems, you get the few that can sometimes be the cause of all the problems. It's just because they get to a point where their immune system's just knackered.
If Costia is free swimming, is it possible to then test the water for Costia rather than have to stress the fish out and get a fish out to scrape?
Always in, because
No.
obviously then it's when
Right.
it needs a host still. So
Right. Oh, I see. Yeah.
that's why we check the fish. But yeah, nasty stuff. You've been unfortunate there.
Oh, it's been horrible,
Very
because
unfortunate.
it's not a case of we just didn't try to know what we were doing. We really did try and learn about it, and we learned so much. I mean, I can't believe how much we know compared to what we did when we had the old pond.
Yeah. But now it
know,
sounds like you're in recovery mode. If your
yeah,
parameters are stable and the parasites are gone, the heat and the
yeah,
salt combination is superb, because obviously at 24 you get the immune system working towards its absolute optimum.
yeah.
And
Well, we
then
need to take that down soon, because obviously we need to take it down to about 20, I think, because the cost of fuel and everything. We're kind of, but we're at the right time of year to start doing that. But just we were led to believe that you couldn't treat for Costia or fluke when you've got salt in the pond, but we've since now learned that actually with some of the Colombo products, you can with salt. So the other question I was going to ask you is, at the moment our salt is 6%. We never had salt in a pond before. Sorry, 0.6. And how long is it safe to keep it at that level? And why isn't it that more people know that you can treat with salt? Because I've heard that so often. You can't treat if you've got salt, but you can.
There's a lot of combinations out there that you sort of, they become old wives' tales to a little bit, to be honest. But salt and formaldehyde, so formalin, on its own is quite a lethal combination. But even when the formaldehyde is mixed, like you've got the premix with malachite and green, we can safely use that with lowish levels of salt, no problem, to about 0.3%. When it goes higher, we always just tread with a bit more caution. But in regards to treating flukes and Costia, I mean, you've got that many different options out there. Your question directly, or being told you can't treat for Costia and flukes while there's salt in the pond, is an absolute load of rubbish. Whoever told you that needs to go back to school, really, to be honest. But you just depending on the medication that you're using, and FMG is not the only medication for treating Costia. Potassium permanganate can get rid of Costia when used at the right doses, and Colombo's Alparex does the job as well. It's an absolutely fantastic treatment for getting rid of single cell parasites, especially Costia. So, and works fantastically well with salt.
Yeah.
Because obviously the malachite green that's in there is a base, no problem, and the acroflavin, more than anything, acroflavin and salt is a great combination. So you've had no issues there. And in regards to fluke treatments, there's absolutely no issues with fluke treatments mixing with salt in the slightest. So you've been advised wrong there for sure.
We thought we'll run it at 0.6% salt just until we've got the new fish in, so that they settle in, because it's actually quite good for them to have a bit more salt, isn't it, in the beginning? Am I right?
It can help just settle them down. Yeah, not so much, to be fair, on sort of your side of the fence, not so much of a big problem. When we're getting them in from Japan, like we did last night, there's so much stress. We just want to protect the osmotic regulation. That's why we use the salt.
Okay, so the next question I've got is, when it comes to getting new fish, obviously, being hobbyists, we don't have quarantine facilities. We can't bring a fish home and quarantine it for 6 weeks and decide, it looks like it's fashion, whatever. So aside from obviously buying, your fish from someone reputable who perhaps, quarantines their end, is there any other way of preventing a new fish from introducing something nasty into your pond? For instance, like a dip or something that you put them in before you put them in your pond. Is that something you would advise against, or is that a good idea?
Obviously, if you're microscope savvy, the absolute best thing is to get it in a bowl when you get home and run it under microscope. Because I will never advocate the use of chemicals unnecessarily, because they can do damage. It's a stressful process for fish. So absolutely not just randomly using meds or having them dipped in something. Not at all. If you're concerned, obviously, when you get back with your fish, yes, by all means, run it under the microscope, check if there's anything, and then you know what you're going to be facing. Likewise, you know, you can get that fish be perfectly clean when you get it home, and then, you know, 4, 5, 6, 7 days later, find that all of a sudden you've got a bit of a fluke outbreak going on, or maybe a bit of costy or something like that, depending on the circumstances, time of year, level of stress from transit. You know, you driving it back from a dealer for an hour or two versus it being on overnight courier, completely different world. So it all relates down to the stress as to what the outcome will be and how that fish will settle down. Got to remember their body's having to adjust to your water. So coming back to the scenario I mentioned with your fish beginning from that old pond to the new one, even this fish from the dealers to yours, it's got to adapt to water. There might be slight differences in pH, all these things, and this poor little fish has got to adapt to it, as well as then going into a new environment where there can be completely different pathogen pressure. Just an example, which all your fish are dealing with perfectly fine because they're in there and their immune systems are sort of at equilibrium with it a little bit. All of a sudden, this new little fish that's never seen any of that before, not been in that environment, gets, you know, hit. It's like being hit by a bus, and it's got to deal with that and overcome it. And again, furthermore, that's how that fish overcomes that process and the stress of it will depend on your water temperatures. You know, if you introduce one now running at 24 degrees with a bit of background salt in there, you're doing a lot to help de-stress, and the fish's immune system is going to really kick in and probably, you know, overcome a lot of these issues very quickly. Whereas if you do it when it's too cold and the immune response isn't there, what you can tend to find is then you get the sulky fish. It sits, it don't look happy, and it takes a lot longer to adjust.
Yeah, I mean, as well, I'm hoping the salt as it is might just discourage some of the parasites as well, just while we're going into that time of year where they sort of seem to be everywhere.
Yeah, to be honest, not even the salt. Your best thing to do is just hold a decent temperature.
Yeah.
That's it. So whatever that's it's a lot easier.
So 6%, 0.6% salt, you think should only just be a short-term thing, just for a while while it's medicinal?
To be fair, you can use it 2 or 3 weeks up to about a month with the heat and the salt should have pretty much done its job.
Brilliant. Okay.
What you might find is if there's a fish in there that is severely damaged from what's happened, it might just be that it takes a long time, or it might not fully overcome it.
Yeah.
You've got to bear
what
that in
would you say is the best way to deal with when you do get an ammonia or a nitrite spike? I remember last year we had this nitrite and we could not get rid of it, and we tried this stuff called Night Out. That didn't do anything. Funny enough, we put some fish protect in there, and but that was obviously after we'd already had problems, and that seemed to help the nitrite. I don't know if it's meant to. It doesn't say that on the bottle.
I think obviously it's quite tough for you because last year was the first year of your pond, wasn't it? So from
the
March,
first full year.
You've been going through it, so you've got a massive period of instability anyway. So to be fair, you probably could have thrown countless ends of stuff at it, and the problems would have just kept bouncing back until it eventually finds its own balance. Again, with the heat, a really easy trick with the heat is to stick the heat right up, because as well as the immune system kicking faster, the bacteria multiplies faster in the filters and the whole environment. Right. So easy from that, you just get your filter cycling more. And obviously, at some point, you always have to put the fish in because we need the ammonia loading from the fish for the filters to sort of feel the pressure from it. But bacteria products are good. There are some really good ones out there. The EA filter gel is a good one. So is the Bacter Plus gel. They're quite similar products in a lot of ways.
PSB, I think we've got.
PSB bacteria as well. Really great. That's great. It's a different bacteria because it's photosynthetic cleaning bacteria. So it's good for targeting organics, but also shifting ammonia in times where you might get an ammonia spike as well. For dealing with nitrite, not such a good product, to be honest.
Right. So.
But that's sort of it's always a tough one, but it's understanding why you've had a spike. To be honest with you, that's the biggest part, because you might have a spike. It's finding out, is this something inherent problem with the system, or is this just because all of a sudden the sun's out and I've fed twice as much for the past couple of days than I had been doing, and everything's got to catch up with it.
Yeah, because last year when we were going through all of this, we were doing lots of water changes, but it turns out actually that doesn't necessarily help, does it? Because as you're reducing the water and filling it back up, they're just producing more ammonia and the fish
It's
actually.
not so much that it's the fresh water can obviously, depending on how you're getting it into the pond as well, can just upset that balance again. If you're not dechlorinating it properly, you could be adding a trace of chlorine in there, which then is going to cause havoc with your filter bacteria. I am sort of one, to be honest. If you've got severe ammonia, then there's probably different ways we need to deal with it. But if it's just a slight blip in nitrite or something like that, you need to first take a step back and just look, is this something I've just done, or is it an inherent problem where you might need to reduce your flow rate through your system or something like that? But step back and see if you possibly caused it. And in that case, sometimes it's just a course of seeing it through. If you go from a filter, if you're feeding 100 grams a day, and all of a sudden you step up to 120, you're going to expect a little blip in your parameters at some point, because the filter bacteria has got to adapt. So it can always be, it's a little bit, it's a scenario I never like sort of advising on too much, because in my case, when we up the feeding and we see the ponds and the system change, I carry on doing what I'm doing, because I need to let everything adapt and rebuild to that level. But the scenarios to that, whereas I will only be doing that with the heat. So I'm talking a very small, a short process for me to get things back in line. Whereas if you haven't got that heat, that process can be prolonged and then potentially damaging. So it's never too straightforward.
No. Just talk about filters and cleaning filters.
Yes.
So on an average, well, basically what we're trying to do is we're trying to clean the bead filter once a week, and the Nexus 2 or 3 times a week, depending on the time of year. Obviously in the midsummer when it's boiling hot, probably 2 or 3 times, but then maybe in the winter, maybe once. Can you over clean a bead filter? Can you overdo the cleaning, or is there?
So I'm gonna jump straight in on the one and get my position. I'm not a big fan of bead filters in the slightest. The closed, and probably the K1, the K1, the A1's probably the one, if I had to be forced into it, would be the one I would choose. The ones with the tiny beads from the past scare the life out of me, because
this is like a blue.
Yeah, it's more. It's obviously the vessels are all the same, but we were talking about what's in them. But the general concept, these really closed systems where you can't truly see what's going on inside of them. The beads the real beads had a huge issues with clogging, building up, and really becoming sort of shit collectors to the biggest degree. And I've seen a lot of problems come from ponds where they've been at the heart of it, and when you eventually get into it, it's been at the root, reoccurring trichodina problems, which instantly tells me there's possibly waste sat in a system somewhere. And that's been found when a bee's been really fully stripped down. You've got all the guns and the crap in there, and I'm not a big fan of them, full stop. But what I would say is, for sure, be cleaning them on a regular basis. With the K1 system, clumping's not going to be an issue, or shouldn't really be an issue. But with normal beads, my God, keep on top of them, because the last thing you want is them beads clumping together.
I think what we've got inside is the same as the little tiny version, small versions of what we've got in our Nexus. The little
K1. That's it. So that's what I'm saying.
They are K1,
the actual bead filter, the tiny beads inside. There's so many of them, so very quickly you can get this clumping. And I'm just not. I like systems to be open, where I can easily see what's going on in them. Even in a Nexus, you can very easily sort of shift the K1 to see what's going on at the bottom of the Nexus. But it's very I've not seen it really once or twice where there's been settlement in the bottom of a Nexus, because that's not how fluid beds work.
What would you do instead of a bead filter then? If we
depends.
Could change
you've got your main system as your Nexus. So I'd probably go above pond. I know it's not always everyone's choice, but shower filters are superb. Obviously, a superb way of oxygenating water as well. So that's certainly a strong option for additional filtration. Well, it's depending on what you was wanting to do and why you've got that secondary filter there in place, because, like I say, your Nexus you should do the bulk of it for you.
Oh, really? So you think a Nexus would be enough anyway on its own, without the bead filter being that necessary?
More than likely, and this is sort of tied in with some of the conversations past couple about energy and all the rest of it. It's they're a great standalone system, and then when you're adding anything else, you've got to look at why you're potentially adding it in there and what's the reason.
I think it was to polish the water or something, but My ears have just pricked up there about what you said about that can be the root of problems. Maybe that is where the costume is just being sat and
No, I
held.
don't. I don't think, because it's relatively new. I'm talking about these problems building up over long periods of time,
Okay.
where it's just little bits of
Yeah.
sediment, but over time it just gets worse and worse and worse.
Right.
So
I see. Yeah.
I don't. And like I say, that's more with the traditional bead as opposed to the K1 base, because even the small micro K1 is way bigger than the beads are. So sorry, cleaning your Nexus, there's no real golden rules. You want to be doing it frequently. The biggest thing with them is you want to be getting a good purge on your bottom drain frequently. So the very least, you want to be doing that once a week. But like I say, you're doing it more times than that, so you're getting a nice purge on. The thing I love with the Nexus is, you can't really over clean it, because the important bit in the outer chamber is protected.
Yeah.
It's protected from the clean. It's just a protected area of filtration anyway. So you're doing no damage. Coming back to when you started with your original pond, what was it, box filter or something on there?
I don't know. I don't know the actual term. This is where I should have it pulled down here, really. But it had the brushes. It was like a big green dustbin with brushes in it, and layers of foam.
So what you can tend to find is, if you've got systems on little beginners ponds like that, what you can tend to find is cleaning them can be a brutal process, because you're disturbing all the biological side as well as the mechanical all at the same time. So you need to find a balance there and not overdo it. But with the sort of systems we're talking about, especially with the Nexus, you're not harming the bio side. So clean it daily if you want. There'd be no harm in that.
Oh, right. Okay. Aside from the magazine, which we've signed up for, by the way.
Yep, fantastic.
Obviously there's thousands of books on koi keeping out there, but generally speaking, when I've kind of had a look, they seem to be written more for the koi professional, let's say, rather than the koi hobbyist. So is there a book, or maybe two books, that you could recommend for people like me who are really, really loving the hobby despite all the problems that come with it, but when you want to look something up, it's in simple terms that everyone can understand? Do you know what I mean? What we do and what we can, is there a particular book you can recommend?
Probably not. When I was younger, I had a silver one. I can't remember what it was called. It might have just been Koi. Was quite a good book, covered a broad range of stuff. But I think it's generally the whole information base has been underserved for a long time. Hence why we started the Koi Talk venture, because not only that, obviously books can become outdated quite quickly as well. Not so much in the koi world, not too much changes, but if I look back from them early books I had, a lot of that information is relatively old, certainly on filter systems and stuff like that, compared to where it is now. So unfortunately, I would say you're best spent on that subscription to that magazine every month. And we just keep trying to bring as much info out there as we can. This is what the magazines were always great for. Missed it for a long time. They were bringing information through constantly for people to learn from at all different levels. So I'd say it's probably the best bet, to be honest.
I know that you've been talking about male fish recently. Now, I've never been bothered whether it's male or female, or I don't know. It doesn't matter what it is. It's just whether I like the fish. Same for my husband. We've got females. We had a mix of females and males, and actually, we've got to introduce fish into our pond now to get the bacteria working again. We've just got a lovely male shiro, which is coming soon, and we've got another fish. I'm not sure what sex that is. Do you think it's a good idea to have a good mix of male and female? Because if you were to have too many males and not enough females, the females could get really, for want of a better word, gang raped every 5 minutes and get quite stressed.
No, this one. To be fair, that comes down, obviously, if you're in a pond where spawning is a potential risk, that's where you're going to have, obviously, it's more natural ponds that are sort of going with it a little bit, sort of the climates that can trigger spawning naturally. The environment you're talking already, with the temperatures that you're at and that kind of stability, you're massively reducing the likelihood of spawning happening, regardless of the mix of males and females. So
Right.
No, I wouldn't be concerned either way
Doesn't
about
actually
how you
matter.
balance that up, to be honest.
No.
If they're going to spawn, it's going to happen. You could have literally 19 females and 1 male. If it decides it's going to happen, it's going to do it.
It's going to happen.
Yeah.
Talking about spawning, I've heard a lot about egg-bound fish as well. We've never had that experience. I've heard, and I don't know where I heard it from, but I've heard if you don't have like a spawning brush or a spawning mat in your pond at that kind of time of year, the females can feel like they haven't got a suitable place to lay their eggs, and it can cause them to become egg-bound because they just refuse to lay the eggs where, there's no nest.
It depends what's happening. I mean, not obviously, a lot of female fish never get to the point of really spawning. It's something that has to be sort of worked on a little bit, setting the environment up right for it. That's why I say our controlled ponds, spontaneous spawning is not all that common, because we do have generally, even with the weather, a lot more control over what's going on. But if you're looking to create an environment to stimulate spawning, yes, brushes are a big part of it, because it obviously helps stimulate what's going off.
We don't really want it. Obviously, we don't want that.
No. Then that's it. You just stay away from it. Give the most stability you can, and it'll probably never be an issue for you.
It's not going to cause them to get egg bound then if they haven't got somewhere to lay their eggs.
No. Egg bound is, you just tend to get some fish that just end up going that kind of way, where they're carrying a lot of excessive egg, and that becomes a problem. And obviously, fish that are spawning quite frequently, you want to manage a little bit more as well. But just in general, I don't think it's a day-to-day worry, to be honest.
Right.
So there we go.
Have you got time for any more?
One more, because I've got to. I'd like to get on with my rant.
Yeah, sure. Okay. Let me just make sure there's nothing else. Yeah, this is one that my husband really wanted to know about. The best way to winterize a pond. Basically, what temperature would you say was a good temperature to run a pond at? Salt levels, feeding, that kind of thing. Just briefly.
Yeah. No need to obviously just go randomly chucking salt in. No. So that's it. The best way to winterize is to have the best summer you can possibly have. Feed them well, keep really, really good conditions over the summer as much. Have a nice sort of cooling off period in autumn, just slowly winding things down and make sure everything is the best it can be before the really cold temperatures hit. That's obviously if you are unheated and you're just dealing with nature, so to speak. Because going right down to them cold temperatures, the koi will survive it. You just want a nice stability going in, and then when you're in that point and it's really cold, probably just leave them alone as much as possible.
And the temperature?
If you're heated, I would say anywhere between 8 and 12 degrees.
Okay.
It'd be a really nice sort of optimum. Absolutely no concerns about going down to the 8, but certainly I don't see any point in being any warmer than 12.
Right.
There's just either absolutely pointless. So your next step, if you're wanting to do a little bit more and go a little bit more sort of raising based and keep building a bit of body over winter, I'd be a minimum of 18, probably up to about 22. Or if you're actually looking to grow fish over winter like toasai, still in your 24, 25 temperature range. So
okay.
Just
that's great.
Them kind of temperatures will work great.
Well, it hasn't been all bad, so but it's been really useful listening to your videos. So thanks for sharing all your stuff.
It's pleasure. It sounds like you're on the right side of it, and I'm sure if Kev's got you on track, just keep listening, and you should get there. But thank you very much for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
Appreciate it.
Take care.
Nice one. Thank you. Right, guys, let's get into this one. So you might have seen a while back, I think it's one of the first videos I did, to be honest with you. I was in this office, I just had my phone and hooked it up over the top of the computer. It was about a little word, tategoi. Now, whether you know about this or not, well worth watching that video anyway, because I pretty much summarized it in full and quite well, but I'm going to just sort of fill you in a little bit more on this again. So tategoi, this is a fish. It's a Japanese term for the fish that a breeder has selected out as is his own opinion the best fish that he is looking to grow on, the fish with potential to grow on in future. Very, very important to remember. It's his opinion. And a point that I really want to stress is, one breeder's tategoi can be another breeder's tategoi, which is the fish that are not tategoi. Just, they all fall into that bracket. So if we're looking at, say, Dainichi compared to a new up and coming Kohaku breeder, just, fictional one, it's more than likely the case that Dainichi is producing better fish that he rejects as tategoi than the tategoi at this new up and coming breeder who's only been producing fish for 3, 4, 5 years or something like that. So in essence, the word is it's really irrelevant, to be honest with you. You can see it when you're in Japan. It's very easy if you've got an open fish house where a breeder's not hiding tategoi. It's very easy to see that kind of pond. But let me tell you, you'll always, they stand out because, yes, generally, if the breeder knows what he's doing, they're going to look higher level than the rest of the fish. But let me tell you, these guys do not part with tategoi very, very easily. If they do, they carry serious price tags at most places because breeders will price them based on their dream of what that fish might be worth at 2 years old, 3 years old, something like that. So bear that in mind. Very, very few times over the nearly 20 years I've been going out to Japan have I, pulled genuine tategoi away from a breeder. And let's face it, the minute you actually do pull it away, if you ship it home, it's not tategoi anymore. So, and the whole thing of it, when you actually look into it, what's tategoi is tosai, 90% of that is just going to become tategoi that's sold the following summer when it's harvested anyway, because there's probably only that 10% that'll be kept as tategoi again. So for you guys, really, it's a complete, and for everybody, the word is so irrelevant when you're looking at a new fish purchase, because the only important thing is the fish in front of you for the budget you've got at the time. So the reason for this rank coming up again, I've seen it with some dealers getting back out to Japan again, and all I'm seeing is fish that are, in my opinion, far, far inferior quality that's being sold as tategoi just because it's underdeveloped and it's got some development to do. That is not the definition of a tategoi. Just because a Shiro Utsuri has got the sumi down doesn't make it a tategoi. All it means is there's room potentially for the sumi to come up, develop and progress. It's not fully developed at that point. So I really do, the whole tategoi thing, it's great to see these fish, and the tategoi dream of potentially getting one and it becoming, an All Japan Grand Champion after 5 or 6 years. Don't get me wrong, it's amazing, but my God, it's a hell of a dream to chase, to be honest with you. So yeah, when it really comes down to it, it's not relevant. There's very few of these make it, and if you are seeing these from a half decent breeder and they're 400 or 500 quid or even less, absolutely not. It's just, I hate seeing the word used for marketing purposes. Whether it's being used incorrectly or not, I don't know, or whether it's just complete and utter bullshit to try and trick people into believing it's something that it's not. Either way, don't be fooled. It really frustrates me seeing it because it's very misleading. And yeah, please watch that other video. It'll say a lot more about it. But yeah, just stop it. Really do. It's annoying. And yeah, true tategoi are going to be costing. We're going to be in the thousands of pounds, and especially when we're seeing it as tosai. If it's tosai and it's a couple of £100, at that point, it's probably a tategoi that the breeders actually rejected, because if it was genuinely his tategoi, you might have got 1 or 2 if you really fought it. They'd be expensive, and it'd probably be staying in the mud pond as well to warrant the price to grow it on and obviously, yeah, help fulfill some of that potential. So that's all it is from me. If you're seeing this out there, do not be guided by it. I think the advice I gave in the last video was pay attention to the fish that is in front of you, and that's it. That's all you need to be doing. Forget any other words attached to it whatsoever. So there we have that one. And then, yeah, the second one. So if you are friends with me on Facebook, you might have seen we got Steve set up one of the quotes from one of the recent articles in Koi Talk about male koi. And it started a really, really great debate on the whole thread. And yeah, Craig, who put a good point across. Actually, I'm just going to get this on my phone. Just bear with me a second. Yeah, basically was asking, is there a big push on males because there is a larger profit margin on flashy toe size / Nisai than a soft belly female? Absolutely not, is the answer to that one. You'll never get any bullshit from me on stuff like this. The only reason for me personally, I'm banging this whole drum about the whole male thing, is because I think the information out there is historical and wrong and not up to date. You know, we talk about the size of male fish. For one, we're seeing more and more fish hitting the jumbo sizes. You know, not the incredible. We're not seeing them breaching the meters like the female stuff, but 80s, 90s. They're getting there, and the numbers of them at the All Japan show every year is becoming more and more, and the quality's there. So this is happening. This has been happening for a long time, not just coming to fruition now. It's a process that's happening. So if we really look at this 10 years down the line as well, it's just going to get better and better. You know, yes, probably the females will always be marginally in front, but if you actually look at it as well, all of the infrastructure is set up around getting the most out of the female fish because they're currently the most valuable. If that mindset changes and more focus from breeders comes to it, which it will do, I can really see at some point it getting closer to leveling up. That's my belief. But yeah, coming back to the question, it's absolutely nothing to do with this. As it stands at the minute, still, bar the few, real exceptional fish out there, but that applies to female as well. You know, we're talking price bands that are out of reach to most people. When it comes down to it, I do firmly believe because of the price difference in male to female, a lot of price ranges, it's still the better option for a lot of people. And I'm not just talking, a lot of people don't really care. They buy what they like, and that's absolutely great. I'm all for that. But if you are seriously getting into koi, and I think probably the price range I'm looking at more than anything is sort of like maybe £500 up to say £1,500, and even as far as a couple of grand. What you're going to be getting there, especially if you go into bigger breeders, if you want to buy bigger brand as well, from the higher quality bloodlines, your money doesn't stretch very far when you're talking female of quality. And when we're still seeing female fish roughly a third of the price of males that, in my opinion, the same quality in structure and everything else, I just don't see the point of chasing it because it's all got to be female. This is exactly why I'm doing it. My whole mission with this is just to help people and want people to build better collections of fish, enjoy the hobby more, because when it becomes almost impossible to buy because you've got this checklist of stuff that could be fulfilled if you just went from male to female, you're going to get more in pattern and skin than you are with female potentially. Certainly in pattern, that's probably the area where it's going to come the most, because that is the real bit that sticks the most amount of value on. When you've got all the quality elements there, body and skin, there's heaps of fish in Japan that have got exceptional body and skin, and then nice patterns. But when you talk about those real special patterns, that's when prices seriously jump. And you will tend to find in that price range I'm talking about, you'll find more of those males with those exceptional patterns for that kind of price than you will the females with, in my opinion, very, very few drawbacks to it all, to be honest with you, especially when they get in the size, they get in the body volume if you pick them correctly and get the right bone structures. So game on. Nothing to do with margin. Margin, you just tend to find dealers are working on whatever they are across the board, regardless of it male or female anyway. It's just because the price is affected because the initial buying price, and the initial buying price of the female is higher than the male. Nothing to do with being flashy. You've got to remember, sort of like 25 cm and below, it's nigh on impossible to get an accurate, anywhere near accurate read on the gender of the fish at that point, to be honest. And then it's only going above that where it's not guaranteed. There's some breeders who are very skilled at it can just start getting a better idea for what's going on. So and you can still see, if you get to farms, I keep mentioning them, Nogami Kohaku, for example, the Benny on them and the patterns are all pretty nice and popping when they're 20, 25, 30 cm. So it's nothing to do with it. Those fish will be priced based on the quality that people are getting from them, and nothing else. Gender's not even playing its part. So yeah, that's not what's happening in the market whatsoever. And generalizing, from my perspective, there's absolutely no push on it. It's just wanting and educating people that these mental barriers that are being in place need to be relooked at. And if you really want to build a top stunning collection of fish, your money is going to go so much further if you're not chasing the female dream too much. Because as you work down that checklist of things you've got, all of a sudden when you get to that bottom one and then you go, I want all this, then I want it to be female, you've just entered a completely different world. And that's all it is, wanting to build awareness to where things are really at. And like I say, I think I posted a picture on that same thing. Dainichi Toyota won the male division this year with a 90 boo male shower. Absolute powerhouse, huge body. This is seriously jumbo size already. And that was seeming to be one of the main points of the conversation, was that people looking to grow jumbo don't want male because it's a lot harder to do. Yes, it is, especially when they're in an environment where the males are competing against the females, which at certain points, maybe 3 years and above, the females are going to probably have a lot more dominance at feeding time, which you've got to be mindful of. So, yeah, magic. That's my point on it. There'll be a conversation that keeps rumbling on, just so we can keep raising that awareness. And like I say, the only motivation for me is helping people really maximize what they get out of the hobby. That's the point of all this I've been doing. So there we have it. I hope that answers Craig's question. Fantastic. I'm going to wrap it up for now. I've still got quite a bit of prep work to get done for all our shipments in the morning, and go and fill some of the feeders up. So enjoy the rest of your evening, and I'll catch up with you all again next week.